HiSec Buyback offers 90% GDA anywhere in HiSec. Simply go to hisec.evebuyback.com, appraise your items, create a contract, and get paid quickly.
This is Talking Stations, a show about EVE Online. I am your host, Artimus Albosa. Joining me today on the station, we have Gergoran Moussou.
Good evening.
As well as Malaclypse.
Good evening.
Malaclypse, it's been a hot minute since we've had you on Tuesday at least. Would you mind letting the team know from whom do you fly with, or with whom do you fly, is a better way to put that.
Sure. So I'm in Pandemic Horde, and I split my time between doing PvP out there and trade and industry in HiSec.
Right on. Well, there's going to be quite a few changes to both those aspects of gameplay, and we're going to talk about them today. So on the docket, of course, the big story has to be patch day. We got a sizable set of patch notes that came out today on Tuesday, November 9th. We also have a new quadrant that has officially started. It is the New Dawn quadrant, which will be pretty interesting to talk about. Looking forward to that in the future, and even more dev blogs to come. We've got a date on that as well. So let's jump right into it. There's a lot of stuff to discuss. And we're just going to start with the patch notes and the impact that you are probably going to be seeing in-game right now. So let me pull these up. And as I do, what do you guys want to talk about first? What's like really getting to you that you want to discuss?
Well, I think the most important thing here is the exploration. Like if we just go down the list, we can see there's been a change to graphics, that the structures render quicker. That's significant for PvP, I think, but not for me. But then after that, they say that 2 new exploration sites have been introduced. And these are going to drop input materials for capital ships. This is part of our new Dawn of Prosperity quadrant that has begun.
Yeah, and let's talk about, because it was a bit confusing the way the dev blog was initially worded. As I understand it, it's even been edited. The way that it was first worded and the way that I understood it when everybody was talking about, they said the exploration sites are dropping capital components. And if you're like me, when you hear capital components, you think the chunks that you put into the final build to build your Moros or to build your Nyx. But that's not what's dropping. Instead, it is a new set of materials, or some of the new set of materials that were required back in May of this year, with the whole changes to how they were built. They're smaller. They're only found in exploration as it is. This is just a new source for them.
Yeah, so typically if a BPO exists for an item, you won't be able to find it through any kind of PvE. You'll be able to find the input materials, but not the other things. So, capital ship propulsion engine, for example, will not drop. But
yeah, that was why I was confused when it originally said capital components, because what I understand to be components have BPOs.
Yeah, that's right. If I say the word component, what I'm talking about is an intermediary material that you need to produce something. So if you want to make a dreadnought, you need to manufacture a capital propulsion engines. That's a component. And then the raw materials are what you would use to build the component. Of course, you can have multi-stage components too, right? So it's not all...
Yeah, like the whole reactions to T2 stuff is an example of multi-stage components.
Right. So components is like a general category, right? Is anything that you only use to manufacture a more advanced item. But there are all sorts of different kinds of components. Reaction materials are typically components.
Yeah, and so
go ahead.
The components that were specifically introduced today are utilized in super capital construction. They're exclusive, I think, to super cap construction, barring one, which can be used in both if memory serves. So the way it works is the pieces that drop in your exploration sites are around 20 M3 per unit, as far as like how many drop per site and how that's going to impact your hauling. You'll probably, because most exploration frigates are able to haul these things out, the sites themselves were balanced around exploration frigates from what we've seen in the Quadrant dev blog. You'll probably be able to haul them out just fine. It's not 10,000 M3. But you'll take these pieces and then you'll plug them into a separate BPC or BPO, depending, which will then build the capital component, which is that final chunk I was talking about, which you then place into your job for your super capital or for your capital. So this is like 2 steps removed from super capital, but still a necessary part. And I think one thing interesting about this is I reached out to some industry folks about potential impacts that this could have on the market, and specifically like, is this going to lower the prices of super capitals or capitals and stuff like that? And as far as I'm aware, obviously different people will have different opinions, but this isn't going to massively, at least on its own, isn't going to massively impact the price of capitals and super capitals. The materials that are dropping here are already in decent supply out there. There is no scarcity involved with these products specifically.
So these, the components that you manufacture from items that drop from the exploration sites are, or let me put that differently. The items that drop from the exploration sites are required, but not in large numbers. It's kind of like just a little added nuisance that, you have to have the thing, but you don't need to have mountains of it. The bigger problem with capital ship construction right now is moving the gas materials in the planetary, because it's very bulky. It's a pain. I mean, if you just looked at the prices, you would say, well, why don't people mine gas in wormholes? It's not because there isn't gas there or because it's not profitable. It's because it's a pain to move, right? Because you can't compress it. So that's likely to have the bigger impact.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people in wormholes specifically do reactions of wormhole gas as a form of compression, so that you can fit more stuff in your deep space transport when you're moving it out to Jita.
Right.
Like when I was living in wormholes 2 years ago, I was doing that.
Yeah, so you need two kinds of gas in order to make these capital ships. You need booster gases and fullerene gases, which are, I think, Gergoran, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the fullerene gases are the ones you find in wormholes.
Yeah,
right?
Fullerites are the wormhole gases that are used for Tech 3 production, and mycoceracin and cytoceracin are found in K-space, typically in specific regions, and are traditionally used for drug production.
Right, so the myco and the cyto, that stuff is already in the game, is being used for manufacturing boosters. Now, if you want to build, I think, anything bigger than a battle cruiser, you need that too. And you need the fullerite gases for capital ships. That's new. I don't know if you need them for battleships, but you need them for the big stuff anyway. So look, compressing that stuff is more likely to impact these prices than, more abundant supply of these little widgets that you get from exploration.
Yeah, and I pulled up just real quick the market for one of them, the enhanced electroneural signalers, and you can see that there has been a price drop, but the price drop started back in mid-October, so long before this dev blog came out. This isn't a reaction to an increase in the supply of these things as a result of these exploration sites. This is just an adjustment in the market to meet a new equilibrium. For me, what's interesting about these new sites, there are a couple. Number one is, we haven't mentioned it yet, but the sites that are out now, the ones which contain the super capital parts, those are only available in Pochfen and Wormhole space. So it's not available in Nullsec, which is where these players live who are going to be building the super caps. You can only build a super capital ship in Asotio, which can only have like the super cap construction stuff online in Nullsec. You've got to have iHub upgrades. It's a whole thing.
Yeah, you can install the super capital construction module. It's just that you can't install the iHub upgrade unless you have SOV, because iHubs are a SOV structure.
Yeah, and when we're looking at the addition of these, number one, it plays into CCP's announcement even way back when scarcity first happened, when they were talking to, I forget the guy's name, but their new economy guy. He's like, no player or no group of players should live in one area of space and have everything that they need. You need to have supply lines to other areas of space. You need to have an interconnected ecosystem. And so this is one more component of this. And if I were to put my speculation tinfoil hat on, I would say that these new sources of these materials means they're probably going away from the typical data sites, just to make it that much more difficult for a player who lives in Nullsec to gather just about everything they need to build their super capitals, to make the universe a little bit more interconnected. The inclusion of Pochfen, I think, is really nice. It's a cool way to highlight Pochfen as another area of space. But if I were to bet, I'd say the vast majority of the sources of this stuff from these new sites is going to be Wormhole space rather than Pochfen.
Is it Wormhole or Lowsec?
So there are three areas of space, two kinds of sites. The kinds of sites that are in the game right now are available in Wormholes and Pochfen, and they contain the super capital components. There are another kind of sites which are coming soon TM. They're described in the dev blogs, but they haven't made it to TQ yet. Those are going to be in low sec, and they're going to contain components for regular capital ships. So the ones we have now, let me find the name. I think it's only in the New Dawn dev blog. The Aegis Secure Transfer Facility is the one in low sec and wormhole space. The Aegis Secure Capital Construction Forges is in the other area of space. Where, oh no, sorry, the Overmind Nursery Groves. There we go, Pochven. So it's different kinds of sites, different areas of space. The low sec ones, these secure transfer facilities, are the ones that aren't in the game yet. It looks like I might have gotten confused, so there aren't sites in wormhole space yet. It's just these ones in Pochven.
Yeah, so I just want to return to something you said earlier about getting players to move around. And, it's not the case right anymore that you can root in one place and just harvest everything you need right there. And there are at least two reasons that CCP would have that design goal. First of all, is you're vulnerable when you're moving, right? People don't gate their capital ships around nullsec if they're wise for a reason, because that's when you're most vulnerable. So if you don't have to move out of that system, you can just stay in place. That makes you a lot safer. Good for the industrialist, bad for the hunter. The other reason is trade is a form of interaction. So in the first place, your goods can be destroyed while you're transporting them, right? That increases the risk. It increases the skill threshold. But also, even trade, just when it's successful, is a form of player interaction. Right? You can't just multi-box your way through that process. You have to either get somebody to move the good to market for you, or you have to learn some new skills and do it yourself. So that's kind of moving us away from this meta where you can just multi-box your way through every problem. Now you have to interact with somebody, or you have to master a new area of the game. And we can see that design philosophy in some earlier decisions that CCP made. When they introduced the 4 new gates a couple months ago, all of those gates moved through previously remote areas, right, to increase the danger, to increase usage, increase player interaction.
And one thing I want to highlight from what you just mentioned there, which is that when you're moving, that is a very dangerous state of existence, is when you're moving from one place to another. And with these new exploration sites, there was a bit of a thing where people complain, they always do it whenever there's something new in EVE, where the new ones, specifically in the Aegis Capital Security Facilities, they have a limit to the number of players who can be inside them. So if someone's inside the site actively running it, no one else can come inside with them. Me personally, I'm less upset by this. I know it takes a lot of players who are like, EVE is a sandbox. You should be able to interrupt players and interact with them while they're participating in PvE. And so they see this pop up and they think, well, now I can't combat them. I can't attack them. They can run these sites safely. And I would push back on that. I would say that no, they still have to get to the site in the first place, and then they have to leave with all that valuable loot that they just extracted. So a third, give or take, of the states of being that person could be in, they're safe, yes, barring what's inside the site itself. They could still die to the site, for that matter. But they still have to get to the site and get out with all of their valuable loot. So they're still vulnerable. They are not in HiSec, right? They're not going to be able to just be instantly safe as soon as they leave the site. They still have to get it to market, get it someplace safe. So I don't think this can be spun to saying, oh, it's completely safe, run in perfect safety. That's just not true. And also, we've seen this before. We saw this with the ESS site key sites. To unlock the reserve banks, they had a limit of 3 characters per. If you had 3 people in there running it, nobody else could come in. And yet we still saw those as not particularly harmful for the game. So I think that you may have, when the ESS key sites came out, a good bit of skepticism. I was right there with you. I was skeptical that it would work. I thought it could be problematic, but it just hasn't been. And what it does do is it unlocks the ability for CCP to balance these sites based on a limited number of people in game. for every single mechanic under the sun, every single piece of EVE Online gameplay, it has always been the case that you can just bring more players to solve your problem. But if there are character limits on who can be inside of the site, specifically I'm looking at the new low-sec sites, which are going to involve combat, then it removes one aspect to the balancing factors that CCP has to put in to make it an engaging and a fun part of your gameplay experience. So I don't have a problem with this. I think that people who are saying it can be run in perfect safety are exaggerating. They're ignoring the fact that you have to find the site in the first place and then get out with all of your valuable loot, and are just complaining to complain or because they're salty about other stuff.
Well, I think you're right that it's not perfect safety. I will say this, though, is that the point of maximum danger is when you have your eyes on the grid and this thing is scramming you, that thing is nuding you, you're taking DPS over there, you got 50 things you got to manage while you're running this site and fighting them. You're a lot less likely to see a newt enter system under those circumstances than when you're hauling your material out, right? Because then you only have to do one thing at a time when you're hauling. You just have to pay attention to your environment. But, it could be a couple seconds before you even notice somebody land on grid if you're running, a PvE site, right? Because you've got like 5 different kinds of situation to deal with at that time. So you are more vulnerable during that time. But you're right, it's not perfect safety. You still have to get that stuff out. You have to find the thing in the first place. If you're a hunter, you're clever. You can set an ambush for them on the other side of the gate if you want, I suppose.
Yeah, and see, that's the perspective I'm coming at this from. I'm coming at this from the perspective of someone who hunts people in sites, who has hunted people in sites. And if you've ever tried to hunt a DED runner or a mission runner or somebody doing escalations in nullsec, then you know that depending on your ship type, obviously combat recons exist, or force recons, the ones that can't be seen on DScan. But you can't assume the player inside that site is unaware of their surroundings. You have to assume, and more likely than not, they're going to be mashing DScan. And so as soon as you arrive on the acceleration gate on the outside, they see you're coming, and they know you're coming for you because there's nothing else within a 1 AU of them. So they know that you're a hunter and you're there to kill them, and they're just going to warp away. If you want to catch somebody running a site that's not just warp onto grid with them like a standard exploration site, then you've got to, yes, bring a tune in to spook them, but then catch them to wherever they run to. Set up a bubbler on their Fortizar or a camp on the other side of a gate that they're going to run through. You're not going to catch them inside that site because more likely than not, if they're in this exploration site, they know there's danger, they're watching DScan, and they're going to run the instant they see you on DScan. So I don't think it's fair to say that they're in their most vulnerable position when they're inside the site, because most of the time you aren't catching them there anyway.
Yeah, that's one reason why a lot of people use ships like the Curse to hunt people in gated sites.
There's a question about the rats scramming. That is a great question that I don't know the answer to, but given the fact that you can't engage the player when they're inside, I'm not sure that it particularly matters. It would matter if we're talking like anomalies, which CCP has mentioned before that they are looking to increase the number of ships which scram inside of anomalies. You see it with the new Crab, the Capital, or the Concord Rogue Analysis Beacons. The Capital ship is tied to the thing. It cannot warp away for a certain period of time. But with these ones, the danger is getting into that space. Because you're traveling around, you're in an area of space, and then you've got to extract the loot later, right? You're not going to just throw it up on market in wormhole space. That's not going to work. I think that's where the danger comes from. That's where the risk comes from in exchange for these rewards. All right, anything else on the new exploration sites, or shall we move on to some other things with these patch notes?
I would just point out that these are like combined exploration combat sites, it looks like. Yeah, fiercely defended, bring significant firepower, etc.
Yep, I think the ones for low sec specifically, they recommend bringing T3 cruisers. And so they're going to be releasing some skins for it, I guess, or putting some discounts on some skins, so keep an eye out for that one. And you know what, I think there were even some in the patch notes where there's some skins mentioned. I don't recall. No, I think that's just in the New Dawn dev blog. I'm getting ahead of myself. As we go further down the patch notes, we do have one slight adjustment to PvP gameplay, which was requested by a vast majority of the PvP community. Recently, there was a change made to the ESS system, so the Encounter Surveillance System. It's the thing in all of nullsec systems, which takes a chunk of the bounty payouts and puts it a little bit in the reserve bank, a little bit in the main bank that can then be stolen if somebody wants to. And the change was they added a 15 minutes PvP timer, Capsuleer combat timer, at the end of it so that people couldn't run away as easily. So that if a defense fleet was coming around and they were trying to catch the person stealing from them, they'd stand a good chance the person couldn't just warp away and then instantly run out of system. But of course that created an issue for players who utilized specifically like filaments. So if they were yeeting around using the filaments to get to other areas of nullsec or to Pochfin and then out, that 15-minute timer gave them 15 minutes where they just had to wait in space and be combat probed or what have you before they could go away, even if they didn't engage in combat whatsoever. So it slowed things down, made it a massive pain in the butt, and CCP has found a compromise here where they now just give a weapons timer, which is 1 minute long instead of the 15 minutes. So there is still a chance if you're chasing someone out of an ESS, they can't just instantly gate away or instantly yeet away, but it is less of a massive just, well, I guess I'm doing nothing for the next 15 minutes sort of thing. Alrighty, in addition, we've got some nice UI changes. So they mentioned the changes to the skill queue. They mentioned changes to other user interface pieces, and I specifically want to highlight the new corporation browser. Have you guys taken a look at this yet? I'm betting not, because you're pretty happy with where you are in terms of your corporations, right?
Right.
That's right.
Okay, well, I want to look at it anyway, because it's something that I've discussed at length. I know my co-host on Declarations of War, Alec, has been requesting this forever and yells at CCP any chance he can get. So he's pretty happy to see this improve.
Requested too.
So specifically, the corporation recruitment feature in-game, and let me get this screen share sorted out for you. Would one of you guys mind walking us through, like, what is this feature, what is it used for, and why is it important?
Tell me the feature again, please.
The corporation browser in-game.
Gosh, I really don't know. I don't think I've ever even opened it.
Oh,
I know
dear.
I've looked at it a couple of times, but I haven't really used it that much. While most corporations which have public recruitment and advertise themselves mainly advertise on Reddit and on the forums, there is a system for putting up recruitment advertisements in game.
Yep, and that is specifically the feature that was improved here. And I'm betting the reason you guys have never interacted with it is because nobody tells you to use it. Even if, like, you join a new player-friendly corp because you saw their ad on Reddit or you saw their ad on a forum post or whatever, when you go to leave them, they're not telling you to check out this feature of the game because it's just been not useful at all. Nobody has a reason to tell you to use it, so nobody does use it as a result. The way that a bunch of features have been changed to remove some of the scummy ways that you could manipulate the system to have your advertisement put up front, and as a result it is significantly more useful. If you go to look at it right now, unfortunately the situation is that people with old advertisements aren't properly set up to use the new system. So if you have an old advertisement, you will need to change it so that you're properly surfaced to players looking for new corporations based on the new system. But some key features I want to point out: you can filter by areas of operation, which is really cool, but they didn't include Pochfen, which I kind of have a chip on my shoulder for that one. I kind of feel like it's the old wormhole days, where wormhole space, they didn't consider it someplace someone would live. Well, now it's someplace someone would live, but Pochfen isn't, even though it literally has NPC stations in it. Like, come on now, guys. Why is the only way I can search for Pochfen corporations is if they're interested in doing PvE in Triglavian space, which is like a whole load of no one, really. So that's one gripe that I have. CC, please give me Pochfin as an area of operation. It's a legitimate area of space. But apart from that, generally a lot of the backend systems, which if you're a corporation recruiter and you're designing an application, you'll want to read the details carefully in the patch notes to know how to design your new advertisement. But like the playtime has been adjusted. You'll notice, and it confused me at first, the hover over for the time zone here is your local time zone. So you'll see here local time 1300 to 1900. That's my time, 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard. And then in the dial, you've got what that is in Eve time, UTC, which I think is super helpful, but slightly confusing at the first go around. So if you're looking for a new corp, don't get confused by that. You can also select any of the languages that are officially supported, which is awesome, and a whole host of various activities, as well as whether they're new player friendly or new player focused, which is a key distinction I'm really glad to see that they included, because plenty of corporations are new player friendly. Not many are new player focused, where they're looking to train up new pilots and really set them up for success. So I think it's really great that they distinguish between those two. And of course, RP.
There's one more thing in the patch notes. This is just a single line, but to me, it's an important aesthetic improvement to the game. Added the option to sort and filter the content in the redeeming queue, which, so you get that login box every time you log in, unless you opt out, and it gives you some skill points, and it gives you a BPC or a drug or a trial skin or whatever. Well, I keep that thing open because I value the skill points. Those I use, but I don't really use the other stuff all that much, and I have to clean out this queue every once in a while. Well, that's a chore, and this queue can get very crowded very quickly. Like right now, I have 51 items in the redeem queue of one account, and I have 4 accounts. That's 200 things. It's like you just have to clear this stuff out every once in a while, and it's a bit of a chore. But now that you can sort it, it's at least organized better. So, instead of scrolling for 30 seconds to find my skill points when I want a new skill, I can just sort by type, right? It's a new feature, and then they're all in the same place. Much more aesthetic, much easier. This is a good improvement to the game.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. Specifically for the heavy multi-boxes out there, my personal experience when going through all the redeeming queue, most of this stuff I don't even redeem it. If I do, I'm redeeming it in Jita so I can stash it in a hangar or sell it. But what I do have to do is care about these expiration timers on my skill points, because I'll leave my skill points in the redeem queue so that if I need to redeem them on one of my other 3 character slots that I'm not training, but just because I need an alt to do something, I want them available there. But I don't want to commit to it until I absolutely have to. So I'll on occasion have to scroll through here and try and make sure that I don't let any of my SP expire without redeeming it, because I'm trying to save it up until I figure out which tune I want it on.
And
Yeah,
for me,
that's what I do as well. I have a bunch of seasonal clothing items piled up in Cheetah. I actually specifically got a station container for that on one of my characters.
So for me, the main reason to clear out this redemption queue, to get rid of Calm, Gamma, Filament, and Algo's blueprint copy and all that stuff, is so that I can keep an eye on my skill points so they don't expire. And now you don't even have to do that if you don't want to. So that's, an extra hour every couple of weeks of my life that I don't have to spend, on nonsense. I appreciate that.
Yeah, if I ever do anything with the blueprints, it's usually usually throw them into invention.
Yeah, I mean, people say these blueprint copies are useless. That's not 100% true. You can invent things from it. Also, just keep them around, and they stack up after a couple months, and one day there's an emergency where you need 100 slashers overnight. Well, how do you get 100 slashers overnight? It's not by stockpiling 20 BPOs, because you have all these blueprint copies laying around, right? So it doesn't hurt anything to have them. They're not totally worthless. Yeah, I mean, if you're not doing any kind of industry, then what do they do do for you. But if you are doing industry, then they do have some value.
Indeed. All right, and also more help pointers have been added. I am not sure what this is referring to, but I know some new player like trainer and helper folks, and they were particularly happy that more pointers were added. So I guess this is a good thing for the people who use it. All right, so we move on to the meat and potatoes today, and the New Dawn Quadrant.
Yes, indeed. This is a big deal, I think.
All right, well, walk us through. Why is this a big deal? What's the big deal about this?
Okay, well, I would not focus on the actual mechanical changes that they say are coming in here. To me, the big clue is in the way this blog is written, or this quadrant announcement. Some form of the word significant appears 5 times in the opening portion of this announcement. The last time CCP said that a change was significant, it completely changed the way capital and super capital ships are built. We got 5, I think, new categories of input requirements. A lot. Anyway, it changed the price dramatically. The market still has not quite caught up to those changes because people aren't building capitals because they are more expensive to build than they are to acquire from the market. So when CCP says significant, they mean it. That's the evidence, right? And they don't say that very often. So to me, that's the most important thing here. You also, on that same topic about the way that they message things, they've said in the past, scarcity firmly ends in Quadrant 4. We don't just promise, we firmly promise. We mean it. The last scarcity has sucked, we get it. Thanks for sticking with us through all the pain. Now here come the good times. They say that again here. New dawn. New dawn of what? Of the age of prosperity. I mean, they're really building up people's expectations here. So now people aren't always able to deliver on promises or implications. It's always possible that plans will change, but unless we have any specific reason to think they're not going to follow through on this, I would credit that they mean business and they're going to bring us a new age of prosperity, or at least not a new age or at least not a continuing age of hopeless, grinding, despairing poverty. I think it's going to be a big deal.
Hopeless, grinding, despairing poverty is like, that is an over-exaggeration. I think I firmly fall on the other side of the fence on what this devlog is. Like, I see a lot of players saying it's underwhelming. And I would say it's not underwhelming, like it is what it is. Your expectations were set too high. I look back to when scarcity was announced and the industry changes were announced and the whole roadmap for getting the economy back in line. And CCP took it slowly, they took it methodically. Yes, you're right. When they mentioned a significant change, there was the whole change to the way capital ships were done, but that took months. And that was just one step in the process. I think as we're looking towards this, like, this is things starting to ramp back up. This is not flip a switch overnight, suddenly like you're making crap tons of ISK again. And quite frankly, from my perspective, I don't think you should. If I was designing Eve, I would leave it in its current state for a lot of the economy stuff. Like, yes, people not building caps and super caps is a problem. I'd like to find a solution for that because that's a missing component of gameplay. But apart from that, if you look at space, you look at what people are doing, what people are flying, and what ships are dying, everything's out there. Like, apart from the players who are building caps and building super caps, everything else seems to be in a relatively healthy spot from my perspective. Now, obviously, my perspective's limited. That's why I have you wonderful people here with me. So, but like, if maybe it's just wishful thinking on my part, I look at this and I see no significant changes detailed. Now, they do promise a devlog on Friday, and you bet your butt we'll be here on TIS talking about it on Friday. But I don't see anything significant. I don't see anything life-changing. I see promises, which, if they keep their current cadence, should happen over the next months to years, and I'm crossing my fingers they do it carefully and we don't have another Rorquals online.
Yeah, so a couple things about that. You're right that their typical way of rolling out a change to the ecosystem is gradually. Because, Hilmar said this in prior interviews, they don't believe anymore that you can sit back, analyze the system, understand it, and then just make the changes and get the result you want. EVE Online is too complicated for that. You don't know how a change to the system is going to roll out, is going to actually affect the environment until you introduce it and you watch things play out. And if you doubt that, then you can get confirmation by looking through old posts on Reddit. There are 50 plausible ideas for how each update is going to change the idea, and often maybe one or two of them is right. Not infrequently, they're all wrong. So we don't know how a change is going to actually impact the economy until it happens. And for this reason, they tend to, take things slowly. That said, they have moved decisively in the past, and particularly the significant update to industry patch. That was a change overnight. The input requirements for battleship size and up, that's something like 50 blueprints. I'm not sure exactly, but it was a big deal anyway. That happened instantly, and the ore market reacted instantly as well. It was months before you could buy standard ore at a reasonable price, like anywhere. So they can move quickly if they decide to do it. And I know this has been a kind of a contentious topic. People have different points of view about this. My view is that CCP recognizes that scarcity is unpopular with the players, and it's the players who make this gaming product possible. Now, when the blueprint changes happened, the PCU numbers started falling, and they fell quite low over the summer. Now, people could give lots of reasons for that. They could say, well, it's a normal summer slump, and it's because the COVID restrictions are ending, and anyway, you can't get good information about player engagement from the PCU numbers. And, those were all. Also, the war was not very popular. I think that was something goons like to talk about a lot. To say, it's because of this boring, stupid war. All you guys should go home. Right? That was their argument. Of course, they would have said anything to get out of that headlock they were in back then. So, But so now we've had a lot of time in between the May when the PCU numbers started falling potentially for all sorts of reasons. And now here we are in November. Well, was it the summer slump? Well, if that had been the entire reason for the decline in the PCU numbers, then the PCU numbers would have recovered to their prior state. That hasn't happened. If it was because of the war, well, the war is over. If it was because of COVID restrictions easing, well, maybe you could make that case because in some places COVID restrictions are back in force because you have this Delta plus, Gamma, whatever. The virus seems like it's always one step ahead. But it seems to me that one thing that has remained consistent is that capital and super capital ships are still crazy expensive to build because of those BPO changes. That's still unpopular. You can still find people complaining about it on any given forum at any time you like. That's scarcity is the consistent thing here. So it's not the entire reason that slump happened. The other factors people have talked about have also had their impact. I wouldn't question that. But it is a significant part of it. I think the data supports that, and I think CCP sees the same and indeed better numbers than we do. They say, hey, people want to fly dreadnoughts. Let's let them do it. I think they're looking at their bottom line, and I think they're wise to do it because it is indeed the players who make this product possible.
Yeah, I think I hard disagree with some of the stuff you said, but you were straight on the money with a few things. The one I want to highlight is CCP has better data on this than we do. My biggest problem with players looking at the PCU and then trying to draw conclusions is the PCU is only one metric, and it's an extremely imperfect metric for a whole host of reasons we don't have time to get into, nor do I care to. And if you try to connect that to any one individual thing, number one, you're oversimplifying. Again, what you mentioned is that there are a bunch of different reasons for why the PCU may be lower or higher on any given day, on any given month, etc. But then also specifically looking at capital and super capital ship construction. If you talk to a capital or a super capital ship producer who is unsubbed because of scarcity, and you ask them what was your gameplay like before scarcity, they would tell you about logging in a host of alts for like 30 minutes, setting up jobs, and then logging off, and then playing on 2 or 3 characters or accounts or whatever. Super capital and capital pilots were not a significant contributing factor to a PCU. It's just the gameplay did not involve having all of your characters logged in at all times and undocked and in space. And even if they were a contributing factor, even if these players were leaving their hundreds of accounts or hundreds of characters online all the time, they were in a station. They were docked up. Yeah, they were building stuff that could get blown up later, but they weren't vulnerable. You couldn't interact with them until they were finished building and they brought the stuff to market. So in terms of like a living, breathing universe that you can go and play with and interact with and have a PvP experience, which granted is my perspective here, then they didn't matter. Yeah, my caps are more expensive now. I'm fine with that. I can afford it. There's definitely a perspective here where capital and super capital, they were a piece. You're 100% right on that. CCP has the data on it, and their actions in this devlog, the way that the language that they're using that you clued on earlier, tells me that they see this as a carrot to bring people back, which is another reason that I think people should be more skeptical about reading into it and getting their hopes up. CCP, and more specifically marketing, wants you to get hyped. They want you to see this, to see an age of prosperity, a new dawn, and think about, oh boy, they want you to be drooling at the mouth about what's coming down the pipeline. And I'm sure it's good stuff. I'm sure it's going to be great. But if you like give in to this hype, you're just going to be underwhelmed and salty and hate the game, even though the changes are going to be a good thing. So don't like get yourself super psyched up. This is not some world-changing event. And I do have one more point. I apologize for the long monologue. And that is going back to your thing about the quick changes, specifically cluing into the changes to capital and super capital construction. I am willing to put money down and say that no change of that significance is going to happen again within the next 2 years.
How much
And
money?
the reason I say that...
Wait, how much?
I don't know. I'll do $100. We'll have to have a third party decide what is of significance whenever something of that magnitude comes around. But
Give me
if you're interested, we'll figure it out.
If I'm wrong, I didn't say that. You said that.
Okay. I don't care. I'm that confident. And the reason I say that is because that change was necessary to set up the mechanics to give them the levers they needed to balance in a new age of prosperity. The whole communication, if you listen to what the devs talk about when they come on streams and they talk about the game, they talk about introducing levers, introducing flexibility in the balance behind the scenes. What can they tweak to keep things in check? Previously, in the age of oracles online, they didn't have the tools they needed, the systems they needed to balance the ecosystem. And the big change with the construction of capital ships and super capitals was enabling them, putting the systems in place for them to make those tweaks. So I'm certain massive changes are going to happen to the ecosystem. We're going to see big changes to markets, big changes to industry, big changes to the ecosystem and your player experience at large. But it won't come from a large change to the game, and it won't come all at once, because those changes are to the systems behind the scenes, and those changes have already happened. That's my perspective.
Yeah, so you make a lot of really good, interesting points here. I wish I could respond to them all. A lot of them I just agree with, so let me just pick out a few. One, early on you said that the data is imperfect, unreliable, you can't get good insight that way. Well, it's true, it is imperfect, but it's always the case that we work with limited, imperfect data. We can't wait for the best, for perfect data. We have to work with the data that we have. And it's always possible that that data is misleading us. So I acknowledge, all of these deficiencies of the data. I would only plead in my own defense there that I'm doing. I would make the best quality analysis I can with the information available to me. And if the option is to withhold analysis because I'm not satisfied with the data, if that's the other option, then I'll just go ahead and risk it and make, potentially wrong analysis based on imperfect data. Gosh, what was another one that you said I wanted to respond to? Are things going to happen all at once? No, no. Well, some things. I mean, like it's not. They're not going to compress. They're not going to introduce compressed R64 one day and compressed R4 2 weeks later, and they're not going to do that. So if you think that compression or transportation is one of the major bottlenecks for capital construction, then that change is going to be pretty rapid. Another change. What else would you say that I wanted to talk about?
I tell you what we can do. While you mull it over, and I'll let the chat mull it over as well. I do quickly want to highlight some things from this dev blog about the new quadrant, the new Dawn quadrant. Man, new is going to be everywhere in this episode. Specifically looking at the artwork. This leaked on Hobo Leaks earlier than the dev blog came out, and it's the new background if you log into the game behind your character screen. People have been picking into it, looking at the details, trying to garner some new information. And the things that have been pointed out already, number one, you've got lots of exploration frigates, which we've seen hit the game already with these new exploration sites. We've got orcas, porpoises, and rorquals, which we know from previous dev blogs, that specifically the one that announced the end of scarcity, that a rebalance of those specific ships is happening. CCP already said they are going to be changing the way rorqual, porpoise, and orca work. They're going to be rebalancing them, so keep an eye out for that coming in this quadrant. But also some interesting notes. Somebody noticed a Kikimora over here. Personally, my headcanon is they put that in there because Kikimoras are like the apex predator of rorquals, and so it was just a nod to the way that people are hunting rorquals. I would personally be surprised if any large significant changes come to Kikimoras or Triglavian ships, but I mean, you can hope.
Yeah, it's
what
possible.
do you think?
I doubt it that they'll change that. I mean, it's just like you said, it's a nod to these things they're like a school of piranhas out there, going after really big fish. Just to return to one thing you said earlier, you said, well, CCP wants us to get hyped up, and they're really trying to gin things up. Yeah, that's true. They do want me to get hyped up, but I don't think they're intentionally misleading me. I think that if they say we're going to try to make a major change, and they're going to try to make a major change. Will they succeed in that? Well, we'll see. I mean, it's easier to destroy than to create, right? And they've done a pretty thorough job of destruction, I would say. And, rebuilding is hard. We'll see how successfully they're able to execute. I think they plan to get this done over the next 2 months because they said scarcity firmly ends in Quadrant 4. I think this has taken longer already than they thought it was going to be. You can see evidence in that. They said in an earlier economic outlook post, they said, we're going to change T2 construction as well. And then they walked that back. Why? Because they ran out of time. Right? So, and here we are in November, starting the 4th quadrant. Of course, nobody ever promised that these would have equal periods of distribution, but it's reasonable to think. I think they're in a hurry to get this over with, and they'll try. Who says?
I'd push back on that one. I think when CCP named them quadrants, they did it intentionally. They could have named it quarter. Everybody is familiar with quarter. It's the first thing that comes to your mind when somebody says 4Q, you think 4th quarter. They named it quadrant explicitly because game development is hard, because things take longer than you expect, and I think you're spot on. They knew ahead of time that they could not guarantee that they'll meet specific quadrant or quarter deadlines, so they named it a quadrant. It's flexible. It recognizes that game development, some stuff you don't get to, some stuff you do, some stuff you gotta reschedule. Anytime some game-breaking bug comes up, now a dev has to fix that. That's resources you don't have working on your new shiny thing. So I would push back and say that if anybody looks at quadrants and they feel like they should be lining up closer to quarters, you just misunderstand what CCP is trying to accomplish with these things.
You're right that it's hard. That game development is hard, and the system is designed to be flexible. I think it's pretty unlikely that we'll still be in Quadrant 4 of 2021 in February of 2022, right? So I think, they might scale back their plans. They might adjust the updates. They're going to adjust to the game, but they're going to finish Quadrant 4 presumably at the end of this year.
Go ahead, Gergoran.
They didn't start the first quadrant of 2021 until like February of 2021. So my impression of then was that they were trying to do it over a full 3 months, but took a Christmas break in the middle of it.
Yeah, well, this is the first year we've had quadrants, right?
Man, I don't.
No,
Did
started
quadrants
at the
start in
beginning of
2019 or 2020?
2020.
Am I wrong?
Yeah, 2020.
Okay. Oh, yeah, maybe I'm wrong.
All right, well, let's dig into the dev blog for this particular quadrant. We already spoiled a few things. Number one, it talks a bit about the new exploration sites, which we went through and discussed. It also mentions, and I mentioned it earlier too, that there's going to be a new dev blog happening on Friday. Let me find the specific wording. Here we are. You'll be able to read up on all the exciting updates, as well as get a peek at what the road to prosperity looks like in a detailed dev blog coming this Friday. And oh boy, do I want to talk about this sentence, and you're all probably going to hate me for it. So number one, a peek at the road to prosperity. I do want to point out that when we think about scarcity and scarcity ending, that is a different thing from being in a state in prosperity. We're at point A, that's scarcity. Point B is prosperity. We got to get point A to point B. That's what these next few months are going to look like. It is exiting scarcity on the trajectory to prosperity, but you're not going to wake up and be prosperous tomorrow. That's not how this is going to work. You got to temper your expectations. This is going to be a process. They're going to be tweaking those numbers, turning some dials, getting things to a state where, yes, the ecosystem can be prosperous. That's what you should be expecting from this dev blog on Friday. It's going to be cool. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be game changing, and you're going to love it. These are going to be changes you're going to like, but they aren't going to be changes that flip a switch and suddenly you're the richest person in EVE Online, or capital ships are prolific again, or something like that.
Well, it says it's a dev blog. It doesn't say patch notes, so they haven't said here that they're introducing a big change on Friday. More likely it will be another economic outlook.
Yeah, and I do like that they also mentioned they're rebalancing the mining ships, which suggests to me more than just Orca, Porpoise, and Rorqual. Maybe we're also looking at the strip miners and the Venture and the Prospect and the Endurance as well, perhaps?
Yeah, I expect a rebalance of all of them, and I think the way that these ores are collected is going to fundamentally change. We don't know how, but they said it's the ships. They've also dropped hints in previous interviews and announcements that they're dissatisfied with belts as a technology in the game, and they said that it's the oldest technology in the game. They've said that they're trying to get rid of downtime. Belts replenish at downtime. I think they've said about the dynamic bounty system, and that was their model for the way features would roll out in the future. Well, the dynamic bounty system adjusts the payout that you get from anomalies, right? Where the asteroid belts do not replenish more or less based on how much you mine them. It's just a static respawn rate. So, and there are a lot of reasons they might want to remove belts just from a gameplay perspective. If I'm in a system and I'm mining in a belt, there could be as many as 25, 30 other belts in that system, right? It's a serious pain for somebody who wants to hunt me to figure out which belt that I'm in. That they can do it. There are ways, but it takes time. And every second they're spent doing that is a second I have to notice them in local, notice them on D-scan, get safe, etc. So I think that they're likely to change. Well, if you want to increase the risk associated with mining, then one way to do it would be to concentrate the number of places it's in. That's why ice mining is so dangerous, because it only happens in a handful of systems in the region, and it's at an anomaly. So if you want to hunt ice miners, it's pretty darn simple to figure out where they are, So you could see a change along those lines coming to mining, but I don't know. That's just speculation.
Yeah, we do have some. Go ahead.
I do think it's likely to change on both ends, both the way the resources are actually in the game and how you collect.
Member of chat Rizio Typho mentions that it's now possible to have a belt at every single moon as well. With adjustments coming to mining, maybe they put regular ore back in with moon ore. I would personally doubt that, but you can't discount the fact that if you're a miner and you're mining purely for profit, like, the removal of belts isn't an issue for you. You already weren't mining in belts. You were mining in your ore noms, or you were mining at a moon thingamabob. I forget what they're called, the little beacons in space where the Athenors go.
I've usually called it a moon belt.
Yeah. Any case, like, if you need ore, you can get ore. It's at an Athenor. You can get ore. It's in an Anom. Belts, they're already effectively removed from nullsec, right? All the ore was removed. It's just HiSec, which is where they're left, and that's a bit more tricky, because either your Anom spawning is going to be absurd, or something's going to have to change with moon mining, because moon mining is only available in 0.5 systems and lower, so the very fringes of HiSec is where you can moon mine. The rest of it, 0.6 and above, there is no moon mining.
You can mine there, you can't react there, but you can set up an Athenor and
Oh, am I incorrect? I apologize. Thank you for the correction.
There are 4 moons all over the place, and but you can't do the reactions there. And
Good
yeah,
to
it's true that if you're mining in nullsec, then you're not mining the belts, you're mining the anomalies, because they just replenish constantly. You put up your ore prospecting array and you get, colossal biscuit anomaly or whatever. But the top, quite a few of the top mining regions in the game are in HiSec, like Metropolis, Domain, the Forge. These are consistently in the top 5 mining regions. So I wouldn't underestimate how much of that is going on in HiSec. Of course, a lot of that used to be in anomalies. They took those out. Some of it presumably is happening on moons in HiSec, but I do think a significant portion of it is happening in the belts there. There are a lot of people just like mining in belts, they just log on, they warp out to the thing, and it's just something to do all day, Not super profitable, but have other reasons for doing it. But yeah, you're right that in nullsec, the belts are already effectively removed. It's not going to affect that.
I did want to pause and look at this, just moving on from the mining thing, because I think we've hit all the points that I personally want to. I suppose before I jump us off, did you have any final thoughts on the mining, the compression, the rebalance, anything like that?
Well, let's see change in the way that the ore anomalies are distributed in nullsec, right? So right now, I think there's 5 or 6 in a system with good industrial upgrades. So that's still, different locations the hunter has to warp to in order to find you. Or they don't have to warp there, they can use their D-scan, but it's still different areas you could be, and it gives the defender some cover. But if there are fewer of them, that's going to expose them to risk.
It could expose them to risk. It could consolidate the defense as well. If you know that the only place you're vulnerable is in one particular spot, it's a whole lot easier to defend. Looking at you, 1DQ, back in the war, if all you got to defend is one single constellation, well, you can set up one hell of a gate camp. Alright, moving on. I did want to pause and look at this awesome artwork. It's just a screenshot from in-game with the new exploration sites. I really love the way that they're designing the in-space systems or new content and stuff. It all looks amazing to complement just the graphical improvements we had over the last year. Because we have been playing EVE along the whole journey, and it's sort of like boiling the frog, to use that turn of phrase. It doesn't seem like a big deal to us because it's all incremental changes. But if you just pause and look at a screenshot like this and compare it to a screenshot from a year, 2 years ago, I'm not even going back 5 or 10, the difference is phenomenal. Which I think is really awesome when we're looking at bringing new players into the game, not just bringing old players back, which has been the major focus of discussion around the end of scarcity. I think these graphical improvements, the way that EVE looks to a non-EVE player, someone who hasn't played it yet, is really important to that. FanFest is coming. We talked about that in a reaction stream with members of CCP. We had... I don't remember who all we had, so to not forget anyone, I'll just say go check it out. It's up on our YouTube channel, where we discussed it with some of the devs. I think we had, I don't remember their names, so never mind. Go check it out. The Alliance tournament's going on. Where is what I'm looking for? July. There we go. The holidays are upon us. Some upcoming events. You guys were having a discussion a bit before we started live. You want to pick up where we left off? What's this new
it's
stuff
the
going on?
Yoil event, which is the annual Christmas event. 2 years ago, that was when they first introduced filaments. And then they've expanded that mechanic first to send you to very random nullsec systems, and then to as the main entrance into Pochven. And then last year they added a special type of metaliminal storm, which the special Christmas filaments of last year added would teleport you to either the HiSec, low-sec, or null-sec storm that they had.
Oh man, I abused the crap out of those HiSec ice belt ones. Just anywhere in space, no matter what, want to get back to HiSec? Plink, Here you go.
Yeah, they say the return of the much-loved Winter Nexus holiday event. It will be much loved. I much love all of their events because they are super profitable if you're a trader.
Last year's event was one of the only events that I've ever really gotten heavily into because those filaments made it so easy to get into, because I could just undock in where I was living at the time, which is T5Z in Delve, with a bunch of other people who are not members of the Imperium.
Not living there anymore, I'm sure. Yeah. Quickly point out.
So, and then I could just undock and immediately pop a filament and go to where the events were. When I was doing the recent Halloween event, which I tried to do a bit of, it was not as close. It was, well, the best sites were in Derelict and Delve, and Derelict was reasonably close by where I've been living recently, which is in Ethereum Reach. And that one has gotten me to... That one got me a decent amount of ISK, but I wouldn't really have nearly as much travel time with the Christmas filaments, so I hope they come back.
And they most certainly are. In the dev blog, it mentions that the ice storm, so the metaliminal storm that Malaclypse was talking about, that's coming back. And the filaments, the ice storm filaments that will bring you to the various areas of space, are returning as well. So I'm super stoked about that, not to mention new combat sites, new hacking sites, new ice mining sites, apparently some cool animated Yule clones, so like the NPCs that you're going to be fighting against are going to have some interesting new animations and stuff to look at. Just basically eye candy to go on top of the rest of the fun and filaments that are happening.
Yeah, each holiday event is associated with a different NPC faction. Like, I think that the Yoil Festival is most associated with Sancha.
Sancha Claus. Sancha Claus comes at Christmas, then followed by the Garistas Bunny. Easter.
And the Angel Cartel is the Valentine's Day event, and the Blood Raiders are Halloween.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're going to get combat sites, hacking, ice mining, you're going to have filaments, and it says here in the dev blog not to be too persistent, but the volatile ice storms will once again travel through New Eden. What kind of New Eden? A freshly invigorated New Eden. And that's the 6th time they're coming back to that in this blog. You're going to have ISK. All right, so we can move
on. You're buying into the hype. Don't do it. Don't listen to this man.
It's not like we're all going to be rich overnight, but I do think they'll be.
Well, I mean, some people are going to be rich overnight if they speculate well enough, and that's because down buried deep in the bowels of this dev blog, we have a short paragraph saying that returning Singles Day, there's a 2-for-1 sale on November 11th, where you can get twice the impact of alpha injectors and skill extractors for a special Black Friday sale as well, and some other gifts. twice the impact of alpha injectors, so your alpha injectors are going to be twice as effective, and twice the impact of skill extractors. Correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm interpreting this right, it means that if you extract 1 skill point, it will be like you're extracting 2 skill points. So effectively, the skill point cost to fill up an injector will be cheaper. Do I understand that correctly?
Well, it's a little bit vague the way that it's written. The way I understand this is that the injectors will be. I mean, here they're not. It's not going to be the case that you can extract 250,000 skill points and get a 500,000 point injector. I mean, that would be nuts. I mean, I'll empty all my accounts.
Just double your SP, you know.
Yeah, I'll drain them all. I mean, when you think
no matter how they go about it, even if they have it on the flip side, where injectors, I honestly think they don't want to have it on the flip side. I think you do it right if you double the amount that you gain. Because if, for example, thought experiment, hypothetically, you take an injector and when you inject it, instead of getting 500,000, you get 1 million. Or instead, like if we're over 30 million skill points or whatever, instead of getting 150,000, we get 300,000. Then, like, it has the same effects. Skill points are doubled. The difference is if you do it after the injector is already made, then the price of injectors is just going to skyrocket. Everyone's going to want them, the market's going to get bought out, and nobody gets to enjoy it. Whereas if you do it on the extraction side, then people are making some serious ISK. They're extracting less skill points than they did previously, but they're getting injectors which are just as valuable as they were yesterday. So I think personally, if they're looking to make this beneficial to everyone, you want to do it on the extraction side. I think no matter what, you're right, this is going to be insane with the way that they're doubling the impact of either the extraction side or the injection side, but we'll have to wait and see. But I think the right call is to do it on the extraction side. Otherwise, they're just going to buy out the injectors, and there's like nobody's going to be able to benefit from it.
Well, I mean, if there are suddenly twice as many injectors available in the game, the price is going to collapse. Well,
yeah, but not everybody is like you, though. Like, even if an extractor, I get twice as many skill points from it, I'm not extracting my skill points. They're mine. I earned them. I need them. I'm using them. So,
yeah,
like,
you can have them back in a day, or right afterward, plus 500,000 others. I mean, we're just making skill points out of nothing at that point, right? I mean,
yes, if I had a lower skill point amount, and so I was getting the full 500,000 from an injector, but I'm only getting 150,000. So if I extract 250 to fill up a 500, I'm only injecting 150. I'm still losing 100,000 SP. So for a veteran player, this is valuable to me if I want to make some quick ISK. It is not game-changing for me. I can't double my SP. If you're a new player, that's possible, but you still have to spend the plex on the raw extractors, so it's still going to cost you. I'm not sure how that would weigh out comparing to just buying the injectors flat out. I think no matter what, it's going to be cool and it's going to be crazy. I don't think it is. Well, it's just pure speculation at this point, so I'm not going to follow that train of thought.
We only have a sentence to work from here. This could mean a lot of different things, but it's clear anytime they manipulate the way that skill points are earned or traded, you want to pay attention to that because that is a very lucrative, high volume market. And the other thing, I want to go back to these events. These events are important not just for the people who run the sites, but it's also what happens afterward, right? You get your war clone blank or your skin or your booster or whatever, and you take it where? To the market. You offload it, right? You sell it to a buy order, and then it doesn't just disappear in exchange for ISK. Somebody else has these things sitting in their hangar. Right now, I have something like 500 basic Radiance accelerators sitting in my hangar. I'm just waiting. I mean, if you're a trader, it's a big deal. Now is the time to make ISK. This is the right time of the year. That's why I say it is indeed a joyous and much-loved event, because if you have your eye on market stuff, you can make some serious coin during these events.
For war clone blanks, they do eventually disappear to a market order when they get sold to an NPC buy order in Blood Raider NPC stations. And one of the things about holiday events over the past a year or so is that they've been doing more stuff where the reward is stuff that gets sold to the NPC buy orders. Like, I think that shows that CCP is trying to have a more fixed value of what the holiday event payout is, rather than typically being stuff that gets sold for massive amounts on the first day and then drops massively every day of the event.
They're moving away from the old model, which was, you blow up a pirate, get a direct cash infusion from Concord every 20 minutes. Right now,
Yeah.
the pirate drops a token, whatever. You pick it up, and then you either move it to the NPC buy order yourself, or you sell it to somebody who will.
Yeah, the old model for holiday events was that the reward was mainly around skins and other stuff that, like the special drugs, but having the NPC buy order commodities means that CCV can more easily control what the value of running these sites is than just having it be a skin that you sell in Jita.
Yeah, I think one other important factor to consider, especially with like the events that give accelerators, is back when accelerators first came out, there was no expiration timer on them, which is a thing on just about every accelerator now. And the reason that that's important is because before, when there was no expiration timer, people would hoard them. There would be market players like Malaclypse who'd be like, oh, these things are going to be valuable up to a certain limit where they pair up with injector value. So I'm not going to sell it for any less than it's worth, equal to what you would pay to get the same amount of SP out of an injector. And the result of this was the newer players, who from CCP's perspectives are the ones who would gain the most from these accelerators, right? They're catching up to the older players. They're actively playing the game. They're feeling they're gaining benefits from engaging with gameplay. They weren't able to benefit from the accelerators because they were being hoarded by all the veteran players with lots of ISK, wanting to sell them to more veteran players with lots more ISK at equal to the same trade-off value of ISK per skill point as injectors. So like expiration timers on accelerators, expiration timers and limited edition skins, like all those things, they have an impact on, yes, making sure CCP isn't flooding the economy with an injection of ISK, but also making sure that where that ISK and where that value is realized is distributed throughout the player base, not just on veteran players who've been playing this for 10 years.
Yeah, that's right. So the first thing it does is help stabilize the skill point market because, I have 500 basic accelerators now. In a couple of weeks, if I still have them, they're going to be 500 bricks, right? So I have to move them in order to realize my profit. And any that don't get consumed in the meantime, those potential skill points are just removed from the game. That's good. That's more dynamic gameplay for me as a trader. There is risk associated with holding these things, and it's also more even skill point distribution, as you rightly pointed out. And so also there's often a question in these events, well, are the accelerators worth it? Should I buy? For the basic accelerators, the answer is almost always yes. For the extended accelerators, the answer is usually that they're more efficient than injectors, but not as efficient as the basic accelerators. The reason you would want the extended one over the basic is that you get more skill points out of the extended one because it gives you a higher boost to your attributes, and also it lasts longer, so you don't have to constantly be chugging these stupid things. You can just do it once a week, and you're good. Where if you want to get maximum use out of the basic accelerators, and you almost have to alarm clock it because they last a maximum of 2 days, right? But that's just one area of the trade that happens around these events. The rats drop, I think, faction loot, right? Gerg, you know more about running these things than I do. I didn't fight Tetramon or.
I mainly ran the data sites, so I didn't fight the rats.
Okay, well, I think you do get faction loot from these guys sometimes, and those don't disappear. And some of those faction items can be quite valuable. So if you're a trader, it is very much to your advantage to find out what drops from these loot, from these sites, and post some buy orders. Because the people who are running these sites are not typically traders. They're just trying to cash out. Cash out by selling to who? Well, to you if you're in the right place, right?
Can confirm, I always sell to buy orders. I love running these sites. I love selling the buy orders. If I could submit a request to CCP, it's make them easier again. My favorite event was actually like the first one, the old Crimson Harvest, where I was just running around in a Crusader, which was the interceptor for the Amar with lasers, and just like blitzing through the sites and flying into hostile nullsec space to steal their Crimson Harvest sites. Like, that was fun for me. But you can't do that with the more complex stuff. You got to have an expensive ship and an expensive pod usually, and it has some value, but not for me. So if I could make a request, make some easier sites so I can blitz them. I do want to move us on a little bit, but before we go, you mentioned what is worth it for the accelerators. And fortunately, there's math. It's a bit complex, but you can just mathematically determine, is it worth it for you based on your current level of skill points and based on current market conditions for extractors, injectors, and stuff. And typically whenever these events happen, another fantastic EVE content creator, also an EVE partner, Oz Eve, he just has a spreadsheet where he does all the math for you, and he will lay it out and say, if you're at this level of skill points, it is worth this much for you, and whether you should go for it or not. So definitely, once these things drop, as soon as we know the details for how long they last, what their bonuses are, you can bet he's probably going to have it in a spreadsheet and will lay it out for you. Plus, if you're just a market person, you're already probably watching his show anyway. So that's a quick shout out to him.
Oz made an announcement today that he's going to be slowing down the daily trading he does for his investment fund, which is one of the only non-scam investment funds in the game. So, and for this past month, he did announce that because he's been busy, he was only going to let current investors buy new shares of that. So it sounds like he's busy in real life, which I hope he's doing well. And I know that he recently had a child, or a few months ago. So congratulations to him.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So personally, I'm averse to what I would call speculative trading, where you say, like, okay, I'm going to buy this thing at 1, and I've done such and such analysis of the market, and I predict based on my unique insight that it will be worth 2 in the future, and I'll sell then, and I'll make a lot of risk. And you can always tell yourself a story about what's going to happen with prices. There's no shortage of stories. The question is, which story is true? And that is, like, to me, that's way too much risk. It's too complicated. People get this wrong all the time, people who are smarter than me. But this is one case with the accelerators that drop from these events that it is consistently profitable. I've traded, I think, during the last 6 or 7 of them. The only time that I didn't make ISK was during the last one, because they had a 2-week expiration date and people couldn't chug the accelerators fast enough. So there's just too many left over. But even then, I only broke even. I didn't lose ISK. These accelerators have a 4-week expiration date. So, that people are going to be able to consume twice as many, so that's twice as much demand, right?
Right on. We are running a bit long, so we'll probably breeze through this, and it hasn't been launched yet, so you can bet we'll probably talk a bit more about it on November 11th or thereafter when it launches. But there's a new website, a storytelling hub, if you will, called EVE Universe, which is going to be sort of the home for all of the EVE lore and that sort of stuff going on with the situation, or excuse me, all of the lore and the storytelling and the intrigue behind the scenes, so behind the different factions, behind these events, all that sort of stuff is going to be housed on this new area, on this new hub, which will be really cool. It's going to replace the current fiction portal, which houses all of the, what are they called, the chronicles, if memory serves, and stuff like that. The people who are into RP, I guess, have been asking for this for a while, because the fiction portal isn't the most user-friendly and also isn't like eye-grabbing. A new player coming into the game doesn't stumble upon the fiction portal and think, oh, this is cool, I want to learn more. Hopefully the new EVE Universe thing will fix that, and we'll definitely keep an eye out on November 11th when it launches, so that we can walk you through what that looks like.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. EVE has wonderful lore, wonderful background, anything to make it more accessible and more a part of the experience. I'm in favor of.
Yeah, a lot of people like to mock interest in the lore but it is actually really interesting, even though it doesn't really affect most people's gameplay. It has really interesting lore.
So, like, all of us who have chosen to inhabit this space are nerds in our own ways, right? But some nerds want to feel like they're not as much nerds as other nerds. So they're like, oh, you're like a weird RP, or who cares about the lore or whatever. We're all nerds. I feel like this should be a safe space to be a nerd. That's just my personal opinion about it. So, if you, look at the lore, learn about this science fiction universe, get into it. You have plenty of time to be worried about people thinking you're a nerd in the rest of your life. This should be a place where it's okay to be a nerd.
Yeah, people have accused me of being a nerd in the past. I think they might be right.
I mean, yeah, like since when is nerd an insult to EVE players? I feel like it's a badge of honor. In any case, I do want to talk about some other things some cool EVE nerds are going to be doing. So in December, there's going to be a new lore-inspired EVE series coming out in partnership with some old friends. So that could mean a lot of things. I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole or the speculation train, but suffice it to say, cool new EVE lore-inspired content coming in December. Definitely be looking forward to that, because I'm hoping it's going to be awesome, and it probably will be. Alright, well that's it for the New Dawn Quadrant dev blog. There's going to be a massive dev blog coming on Friday, plus a whole bunch of new stuff coming on Thursday. So boy, are we going to be busy here on Talking in Stations, bringing you all the news and the updates and what's changing to your game. Speaking of which, we have run long already tonight. We're at an hour and a half in. I do have some stuff to talk about regarding some wars and some updates going on there, but I think we're probably going to consolidate all of that news into tomorrow's show. So if you're interested in what the players have been doing, shooting each other's spaceships and making diplomatic deals behind the scenes, tune in tomorrow. We're going to have Nick and Shen on the show walking you through some of that, as well as any other things that come up in the meantime, whoever knows with CCP. All right, any final thoughts for today's show?
Well, I am excited for the new Quadrant. I hope other folks will be too.
Yeah.
Could be wrong, who knows? But yeah, I am excited.
I wanted to talk about the Alliance tournament, but I guess that'll be tomorrow.
I mean, like, quick reaction, give me a 2-minute hot take. How's it been so far?
It's been really interesting. When I was never as happy to lose a bet as the one I put against Waffles in their match against Templis Calcif.
Oh man, I was never as happy to watch hundreds of other people lose bets as when the network won against Fraternity. Yeah. You should have seen my freaking face when I'm still salty with the commentators. I mean, come on guys, the network was clearly gonna win. Fraternity was hardcore focused on the Armageddon, and their support wing was dying, but I digress. If you aren't watching the Alliance tournament, you are missing out, even if you've never cared about the Alliance tournament in the past, right? If you're one of those people who's like, yeah, I watched it before, it was, I can do without it. It's better this year in just about every single possible way. Yeah. Plus you have the skins and everything.
I got to my computer and turned on the stream during that match, and basically right after I started the stream, I started hearing shouting about boundaries, which I was rooting for the network too. I mean, it has some of your former Corp mates, and some of them are also my former Corp mates. So we both have friends on that team.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of former Corp mates and biases, I also have some former Corp mates, Killa542 over on Templis Calcif, also Solidus. I was glad to see that you died in your match too. So it's always good fun. Even if you have watched the AT before and you thought, you know what, this isn't for me, give it a second try. The finals, if you tune in for anything, tune in for the finals coming up this week. Talking in Stations, we normally record our Sunday show on Sundays, but the Alliance tournament will be broadcasting during that time. So we're delaying our start time this upcoming Sunday so that we can let the Alliance tournament finish, and then probably just talk about that quite a bit during the show, in addition to all the other cool stuff that's going to be happening this week. Boy, we're going to be busy, but it's going to be fun. All right, well, thank you guys for joining me, Gergoran and Malaclypse. Thank you to our audience as well for tuning in, or for listening, or for watching on YouTube, whichever your preference may be. That'll do it for today's episode of Talking in Stations. See you tomorrow.
Bye, everyone.